Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonwa and you are watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Israeli airstrikes kill dozens in Gaza as ceasefire collapses amid renewed fighting. Global leaders gather in South Korea for the APEC Summit focused on sustainability and regional cooperation. And Hurricane Melissa hits Jamaica and heads toward Cuba, bringing destruction and flooding. Less than 3 weeks after the Gaza ceasefire came into effect, Israel has launched fresh strikes on the territory after both sides accused one another of violating the fragile truce. Local hospital officials report that at least 70 Palestinians were killed. On Wednesday, Israeli military said in a statement that it would continue to uphold the ceasefire agreement and would respond firmly to any violation.
Israel has carried out airstrikes in Gaza after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to immediately carry out powerful attacks. At least 60 Palestinians were killed in the series of Israeli strikes, according to Gaza's Hamas-run civil defense agency and hospital officials. The attacks hit homes, schools and residential blocks in Gaza City, Beit Lahia, Al-Bureij, Nuseirat and Khan Yunis. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz accused Hamas of attacking Israeli soldiers in Gaza on Tuesday and breaching the terms on returning the bodies of deceased hostages. The Palestinian armed group claimed it had no connection to the attack and insisted it was committed to the ceasefire deal. According to the unnamed White House official, the U.S. was notified of the decision to carry out strikes in Gaza. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on his way to South Korea from Japan, U.S. President Donald Trump said he had heard about the latest strikes a little while ago, which he said followed the killing of an Israeli soldier. He said nothing's going to jeopardize the Gaza ceasefire deal. Amid a collapsed ceasefire, Israeli strikes in the Gaza Strip have led to devastation and casualties, with rescue teams working to free survivors from the rubble.
South Korea has kicked off the APEC Summit. The three-day event is expected to draw global leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping.
The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit has opened in the South Korean city of Gyeongju. About 1,700 global industry leaders are attending the three-day event at the Gyeongju Art Center. This year's theme, Building a Sustainable Tomorrow, focuses on shared challenges, digital innovation, and inclusive growth. During the opening ceremony, South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung underscored the summit's significance and pledged to strengthen regional cooperation.
In an era where protectionism and nationalism are on the rise, the words cooperation, coexistence and inclusive growth may sound hollow. Paradoxically, APEC's role as a platform for solidarity will shine even brighter in times of crisis like these. As a globally responsible leading nation, the Republic of Korea will make significant contributions to restoring the region's bonds of trust and cooperation. In particular, supply chain cooperation is key.
Global leaders, including US President Donald Trump, are expected to attend, with Trump set to deliver keynote remarks. He will also hold bilateral meetings with several leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump has expressed optimism ahead of the talks with Xi, hoping to reduce US tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for Beijing's commitment to curb exports of fentanyl precursor chemicals.
President Xi of China is coming tomorrow here, and we're going to be, I hope, making a deal. I think we're going to have a deal. I think it'll be a good deal for both. And that's really a great result. You know, that's better than fighting and going through all sorts of problems. And
their meeting is scheduled for Thursday in the city of Busan. This will be the two leaders' first face-to-face meeting since Trump assumed office in January.
Ukraine and European officials will meet later this week to discuss a ceasefire plan with Russia. The plan aims to strengthen protections against future attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Zelensky made the comments during a joint briefing with Dutch Foreign Minister David Van Wiel, saying the talks are scheduled for Friday and Saturday, with advisors from both sides set to discuss the details.
Everyone understands that after a ceasefire, with an understanding of security guarantees, it will be very difficult for Russia to renew its aggression if there are strong security guarantees. That's why this plan is focused on this. I think within the next few days, our advisors are going to meet. We preliminarily agreed for Friday, Saturday. They are going to discuss details of this plan.
A year ago, eastern Spain was struck by devastating floods that claimed 229 lives and flattened entire neighborhoods around Valencia. The disaster left survivors grappling with profound loss and trauma, while questions over government response continued to spark anger.
October 29th marks one of the darkest days in Spain's history. A year ago, devastating floods claimed 229 lives and tore through Valencia and 78 surrounding towns. Torrential rains dumped what meteorologists say was a year's worth of rainfall in just hours. Streets became raging rivers, cars and underground car parks were swept away, and homes collapsed under the force of the water. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed, infrastructure was devastated, and rescue teams raced against time to save those trapped. The floods were caused by a powerful weather system known as Dana, where cold and warm air collide to produce intense storms. A pattern experts warn is becoming more frequent due to climate change. The regional government faced fierce criticism for its slow and inadequate response. Warnings arrived too late, leaving residents trapped as waters engulfed the region. Carlos Mazon, president of the Valencian regional government, was singled out for scrutiny, with many holding him responsible for the lives lost. Even a year later, anger hasn't faded. Tens of thousands have marched through Valencia demanding accountability, while judicial investigations continue into officials' actions on that fateful day. People's emotions go beyond anger. The floods left deep, lasting trauma that continues to haunt survivors.
My sister died here. She slipped away through my fingers. That's why I'm asking, what medication could I take?
Then we have people that doesn't want to have showers or go to the sea or be next to water. There are a lot of aquaphobia. So exposing, talking about that, and of course explaining people that it's a normal reaction.
I'm learning to manage it so I can live as I used to, or as close as I can from how I was before. But I don't think any of us who have been through this are ever going to forget.
As the U.S. government shutdown stretches into its fourth week, federal workers remain unpaid and air travel is facing mounting disruptions. Lawmakers remain at an impasse, with Republicans and Democrats clashing over funding priorities and the future of critical programs.
Republicans and Democrats continued to clash Tuesday as the government shutdown entered its 28th day, leaving hundreds of thousands of federal workers furloughed. The standoff centers on federal spending. Republicans, controlling both the House and Senate, passed a short-term funding bill in September with restrictions on some programs, insisting it pass before negotiations on healthcare subsidies or other spending.
Even their own constituents now are begging Democrats to stop the political games and reopen the government. Just yesterday, the largest union of federal workers, the very people that the Democrats claim that they fight for, came out publicly and urged the Democrats to join the Republicans in passing the House's very simple short-term funding bill.
Democrats, however, refused to back the measure without protections for healthcare subsidies and benefits for 24 million Americans set to expire this year.
And Democrats continue to make clear that we will sit down with our Republican colleagues anytime, any place, here at the Capitol or back at the White House, in order to reopen the government, enact a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, and address the health care crisis that Republicans have caused that is devastating people all across the country.
The U.S. government shutdown affects many sectors, including air travel. Hundreds of air traffic controllers are working without pay, with some taking temporary second jobs.
This shutdown, all it does is it's really a distraction from the focus that air traffic controllers and aviation safety professionals need to have on the work at hand. We don't want to introduce a distraction into an air traffic controller when they're plugging in and looking at the runways, and in the back of their head they're like, I just ran out of money. I have $0 in my bank account. How am I?
Union members have distributed leaflets at airports to raise awareness.
They've sent a message: open up the government, end the shutdown, figure out how you guys can negotiate, have a conversation, but pay us in the interim. Make sure we get paid for the work that we provide to the American people.
With 13,000 air traffic controllers and 50,000 TSA officers unpaid, flight delays are mounting, showing the real impact of the political deadlock in Washington.
Jamaica is reeling from the devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa. The storm is now heading toward Cuba, where mass evacuations are underway.
Hurricane Melissa slammed into Jamaica on Tuesday as a catastrophic Category 5 storm, before weakening slightly as it moved toward eastern Cuba. Packing winds of up to 295 kilometers per hour, Melissa made landfall near the southwestern town of New Hope, tearing roofs from homes, toppling trees, and flooding entire communities. Officials reported widespread power outages, affecting more than 500,000 people, and heavy damage across the southern parish of St. Elizabeth.
Jamaica's gone through what I can call one of its worst periods. Our infrastructure has been severely compromised. St. Elizabeth is the breadbasket of the country, and that has taken a beating. The entire Jamaica has felt the brunt of Melissa.
By Tuesday evening, Melissa had weakened to a still powerful Category 4 hurricane as it moved north-northeast toward Cuba at around 13 kilometers per hour. Meteorologists warn that southeastern Cuba will face life-threatening storm surges up to 3.5 meters. Cuban authorities said over 700,000 people have been evacuated across eastern Cuba as Melissa nears landfall around midnight.
We want to stress again how big this event is and the need for people to understand the risk it poses because of its scale. Wind speeds above 260 kilometers per hour can destroy any facility that is not properly prepared.
While Melissa's winds are starting to weaken, forecasters warn that the storm's greatest danger now lies in its torrential rains and destructive storm surges continuing to batter the Caribbean.
As the world prepares for COP30, a report warns climate change causing millions of preventable deaths each year. World Health Organization and global partners are calling for the protection of people's health to be recognized as the most powerful driver of climate action.
Climate changing is ravaging the health of people around the world. An influential 2025 report from the Lancet Countdown on health and climate change has warned that climate inaction is causing millions of preventable deaths each year. The report, which involved 128 experts from 71 institutions and UN agencies, highlights the devastating health impacts of rising global temperatures. The report put figures on some of the most deadly consequences. 546,000 people died between 2012 and 2021 because of exposure to heat. The report also highlights that 2.5 million deaths every year are attributable to air pollution from fossil fuel burning.
We have new data this year showing that we had more than 150,000 deaths related to wildfire exposure per year, wildfire smoke exposure per year. So the death toll of climate change is rapidly growing, and that is particularly concerning.
Key findings from the 2025 Lancet Countdown report are rising heat-related deaths, wildfire and drought impacts, economic strain, fossil fuel subsidies, dwarf climate finance, and benefits of climate action. The Health Journal's report, released shortly before the UN COP30 climate talks in Brazil, called for increased investment in zero-carbon energy and climate-resilient infrastructure and better planning for health challenges.
Brazil has carried out its largest police raid ahead of next week's C40 Global Summit. At least 64 people have been killed, including 4 police officers.
At least 64 people have been killed in Rio de Janeiro during Brazil's deadliest police operation, carried out just days before the city hosts global events tied to the United Nations Climate Summit. Officials say the raid involved 2,500 security personnel and 32 armoured vehicles.
So far, we have arrested 56 criminals. To date, 18 criminals have been neutralised, 31 rifles seized, and a large quantity of drugs confiscated, which cannot yet be assessed because they are still in the midst of combat.
The operation targeted the Comando Vermelho, Brazil's oldest active criminal organisation. Around 50 health and education facilities saw their routines disrupted, and bus routes were diverted to avoid the gunfire. Local residents struggled to find transport, with some expressing fear over the violence.
I'm very scared and apprehensive because there are no buses. We're here in the middle of the street, exposed to anything that might happen.
It's tense. It's very tense. I've never been through this before. I'm from Carioca, born and raised here in Rio. I live here in Rosina, and it's chaos. So I've never seen anything like this before. It's terrifying.
Large-scale police operations ahead of major events have been common in Rio, which previously hosted matches of the 2014 World Cup, the 2024 G20 Summit, and this year's BRICS Summit. The death toll, which includes 4 police officers, is more than double that of Rio's previous deadliest police operation.
Welcome back to A News. Tensions are once again escalating in Gaza after Israeli warplanes carried out new strikes overnight. Israel accuses Hamas of violating a ceasefire brokered earlier this month by U.S. President Donald Trump. Medical sources in Gaza say at least 70 people have been killed, including 24 children, in what marks the deadliest breach since the ceasefire took effect on October the 10th. Hamas armored wing says Israel broke the truce first and has announced it will delay the handover of the remains of an Israeli captive. Meanwhile, Washington maintains that the ceasefire is still technically in place despite the intensifying violence. This situation raises serious questions about the durability of the agreement and what may come next in this fragile phase of the conflict. To help us analyze these developments and the broader political dynamics at play, we are joined by Nir Bams, a political analyst speaking to us from Jerusalem. Nir, thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be here.
Mr. Bams, first, how is the situation being viewed from Jerusalem today? What is the Israeli government's main justification for these latest strikes?
Well, these latest strikes are actually a part of the agreement. There was a violation of the agreement. Hamas committed to deliver all the bodies in the first 72 hours, and then later in the following days. They have not done so. They have delivered another body that includes remains of body already delivered. That's one. So that's one type of violation. Then there were a number of other violations of armed shootings and with Hamas operatives shooting against the IDF. Hamas claimed, well, we don't know anything about this. It's not our people, which basically means one of two things. If it's not Hamas, then there's not a problem because there was an agreement between Israel and Hamas. And if Israel did not shoot Hamas, then there is not an issue there. And really, Hamas is responsible and supposed to be responsible. And the idea that this ceasefire will last, and it is lasting, although there are some violations that are being answered with Israeli responses. There were a number of Israeli soldiers that were shot and they're shot dead by Hamas. And that's what prompted this round of escalation. The ceasefire is still in place. And if we listen to the President of the United States and then the other regional leaders, it's important to note that the Gaza circle is the small circle of this. The broader circle of what's happening in the region next is more important. And I believe that all the stakeholders are not going to let Hamas again jeopardize the future of the Middle East.
Mr. Bams, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu instructed the military to carry out powerful strikes. What political pressures inside Israel might be influencing that directive?
You've probably followed that there are factors in Israel who always advocated for a stern response. Netanyahu, the prime minister, had committed to have a victory, a total victory, in his words, against Hamas in Gaza. If Hamas is still there, functioning in a certain section of Gaza, about 50% of it, next to the city of Gaza, then in that sense, the war is not completely over, at least in the context of the initial goals of it. And if there is an opportunity to continue the work against Hamas, who violated the ceasefire, there are people here in the government that would say, okay, we should do this in a serious way, both to make sure that it's not going to happen again and to make sure that we continue to weaken Hamas. At some point, there needs to be a transition in Gaza from a Hamas mechanism to the new international mechanism that is supposed to enter Gaza. The international mechanism, the Arab forces do not wish to find themselves fighting Hamas. This is kept and being delayed partially because Hamas is still there.
Near Rams, we have seen growing involvement from Egypt, including specialists deployed to help locate missing Israeli hostages. How central is Cairo's role right now in keeping communication channels open?
Well, Cairo's role has been important, has been central. We have seen that the ceasefire was actually announced in the Sharm el-Sheikh conference with world leaders attending. That's an indication of Cairo's role. But Cairo has another important role. There's still daily occurrences of smuggling of drones into Gaza from the Sinai Desert. And Cairo also needs to make sure that they begin to take charge of what is happening in the Sinai. This is partially how the majority of the weapons that ended up in the hands of Hamas on October 7 came to the hands of Hamas. So Cairo has a very significant role, not only in stabilizing and enabling or participating in the construction of Gaza, but also to make sure that what happened before October 7 is not going to happen again.
Mr. Bams, how are these developments affecting the credibility of the United States as a mediator in this conflict?
Look, I think time will tell. At this point, the United States was able to mediate an important agreement with a broader regional movement. There are many things that are, as these things go, that are still unknown. Hamas is supposed to move and supposed to give their weapons. As we've seen, as they were shooting IDF soldiers, it probably means that they still have some weapons in their hands, and we know they do. And we also see that they're not volunteering to simply leave and give authority to another entity. And what we also see behind the scenes is that they are trying to make sure that when another entity will enter, some of Hamas's people and network will be very much embedded. So there we have a political battle also with the stakeholders of who actually is going to take the reins. All of that is taking place, and the credibility of the United States will be that the ongoing implementation of this agreement and additional movements in the Middle East will happen. This particular incident, I don't think influences this. This is going to be tested, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, if we'll see that the overall trajectory is really coming towards stabilization and reconstruction rather than to the continuation of the war.
Mr. Bumps, civilian casualties in Gaza are a major concern internationally. How is the Israeli government addressing or responding to the global outcry?
The civilian casualties in Gaza are a concern for Israelis as well. There is no intention to get more civilians involved, and there's always a sadness when there's an understanding that civilians are being pulled into the fire. We have seen that hostages were kept inside hospitals, that Hamas headquarters were operating just literally underneath the major hospitals in Gaza. We've seen that in the middle of the refugee camps, Hamas is bringing hostages and creating meetings, and in a way pulling more and more civilians into the circle of violence and into the circle of casualties. And that probably means that it's important to make sure that sooner rather than later, we're going to have a situation where Hamas is not going to be in Gaza to do this. And so that civilians' lives in Gaza could be more secure, and we can really begin a process of reconstruction.
Nir Bams, thank you very much for your time and your insights, and also for joining us from Jerusalem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz is visiting Turkey this week, marking a significant moment in Ankara-Berlin relations. Chancellor Merz will meet with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Thursday at the presidential complex in Ankara to discuss Turkish-German relations, Turkey's European Union accession process, and regional security challenges. The talks are expected to cover all aspects of bilateral cooperation and explore new opportunities to strengthen ties between the two countries. The U.S. government plans to set up its first working groups with Azerbaijan and Armenia by the end of the year, according to Azerbaijani media outlets. The initiative aims to implement historic joint declarations and memoranda of understanding signed on August 8th in Washington. The working groups will focus on border demarcation, mine clearance, and other cooperative efforts. The U.S. welcomed recent steps by both countries, including Azerbaijan's decision to allow cargo transit through Armenia and civil society meetings in Yerevan. Tensions between Georgia and European institutions have deepened after the Georgian delegation refused to attend the Euronest assembly in Yerevan, a key EU Eastern Partnership forum. Our correspondent Nini Nikolaishvili reports.
The session in Yerevan gathered lawmakers and officials from across the Eastern Partnership to discuss issues central to the region's European integration, from human rights and energy security to economic convergence and education. Over 2 days, committees met to debate political affairs, legal harmonization, and the alignment of national policies with the EU standards. But two key partners, Georgia and Azerbaijan, left their seats empty. Baku refused to join the assembly, accusing the European Parliament of undermining the fragile peace process with Armenia. Georgia's absence, however, carries different and in some ways deeper implications. In a formal letter to the Euronest Assembly, Levan Makhashvili, chair of Georgia's Committee on European Integration, said that the ruling team was concerned by the actions and rhetoric of some MEPs that, in his words, contradict the principles of partnership and mutual respect. He argued that Euronest had drifted from its founding purpose, turning into a space where political bias and misinformation overshadow the dialogue. Parliament Speaker Shava Papashvili went further, calling the event a farce and accusing the European side of inviting members of Georgia's opposition under the guise of civil society representatives. By doing so, he said, Euronest legitimizes radical actors and disrespects the will of the Georgian people. European officials in Yerevan, meanwhile, rejected that claim. Some members of European parliaments, including Poland's Krzysztof Brejza, said that Georgia's decision reflected a growing isolation from democratic Europe, insisting that Euronest remains a crucial platform for the Eastern Partnership's European future. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
The interior ministers of the Economic Cooperation Organization gathered in Tehran to talk on cooperation in cybersecurity and the fight against illegal cross-border trafficking. For more, we go to Iranian capital and to Raj Shiralilo.
The fourth conference of interior ministers of the Economic Cooperation Organization, ECO, opened in Tehran on Tuesday by President Masoud Pezeshkian to review cybersecurity and border cooperation under the theme Regional Solidarity, Sustainability and Sustainable Development. He stressed the role of interior ministries in multilateral and regional cooperation and said that regional economic collaboration requires robust, predictable, stable and resilient joint platforms which can be consolidated by the interior ministries. President Pezeshkian added that the ECO region needs proper infrastructure more than ever. The Interior Ministers' meeting convened after a 15-year recess, and the Iranian host has invited Iraq and Oman to Tehran event as non-member observers. On Monday, the Deputy Interior Ministers prepared the draft documents for approval by the Ministerial Conference, ranging from cybersecurity and the fight against smuggling and drugs to the use of artificial intelligence in promoting cooperation among the member states. The ECO Interior Ministers will approve the draft resolutions and issue the Tehran Declaration. Omani Interior Minister Hamoud Al-Busaidi, who is visiting Tehran to take part in the conference, met his Iranian counterpart, Secretary of Supreme National Security Council and President Pezeshkian on Monday. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A News.
Turning to Central Asia, Finland's President Alexander Stubb is on an official visit to Astana, focusing on boosting economic ties, investments, green technologies and nuclear energy. Our Fariza Kalimurzana has more.
A ceremony at Akorda welcomed Finnish President Alexander Stubb on his first official visit to Kazakhstan, accompanied by a large business delegation representing over 20 leading Finnish companies. Kazakhstan and Finland have maintained close ties since Kazakhstan's independence. Finnish investments in Kazakhstan have reached $486.6 million over the past 2 decades, with around 70 Finnish-backed companies operating in the country. Kazakhstan accounts for nearly 90% of Finland's trade with Central Asia, with bilateral trade totaling $172 million last year. Finland mainly exports high-value goods, while Kazakhstan supplies raw materials. Helsinki views Kazakhstan as a key partner in renewable energy, green technologies and rare earth metals. And on the sidelines of the visit, Kazakhstan's Nuclear Energy Agency Chairman Almas Adam Satkaliyev discussed potential uranium supplies to Finnish nuclear plants. The two countries are also set to sign an agreement between nuclear regulators. Experts highlight that both nations share borders with Russia and say expanding trade and investment while adhering to international norms is increasingly significant in the current geopolitical climate. Fariza Kalimurzana, Almaty, A News.
A new chapter has opened in Turkey's rich archaeological heritage. The Iznik Lake Basilica, ranked among the world's top 10 archaeological discoveries, has now officially opened to visitors with the inauguration of its new Welcome Center. The site lying beneath the shallow waters of Lake Iznik continues to fascinate historians and travelers alike. The Iznik Lake Basilica Site Welcome Center, developed jointly by Turkey's Ministry of Culture and Tourism and Bursa Metropolitan Municipality, has begun receiving visitors, adding a new dimension to Iznik's cultural and historical landscape. Officials say the center was designed to enhance access to the ancient early Christian church hall, which was discovered under the lake's surface and selected by the Archaeological Institute of America in 2014 among the world's top 10 archaeological finds. Deputy Minister of Culture and Tourism Gökhan Yazgi noted that the project, initiated in 2022, brought together architects, technical experts, archaeologists, and excavation teams to ensure both protection and presentation of the site. He said the entire area has been reorganized as an open-air heritage zone, where visitors can experience the site without compromising its integrity.
We have made this place ready to welcome all our guests, tourists, and many distinguished visitors. This initiative, valued at roughly 150 million lira, ensures that all layers of the basilica have been studied and preserved in coordination with relevant institutions.
The Welcome Center now includes a cafeteria, exhibition hall, and a lakeside walking path, designed for both visitors and local residents. Officials say the goal is to offer clear interpretation and comfortable access while preserving the authentic character of the archaeological setting on Lake Iznik's scenic shore. Welcome back to A News. Now we turn to South Caucasus. Georgia has announced that it will not take part in the 12th plenary session of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, currently being held in Yerevan. The decision comes after Tbilisi accused certain members of the European Parliament of overstepping diplomatic boundaries and actively supporting political protests in Georgia. In an open letter, the chairman of the Georgian Parliamentary Committee on European Integration, Levan Makashvili, said that some European lawmakers engaged in rhetoric that encourages radicalization and public unrest, adding that offering them a platform at Euronest effectively legitimizes anti-democratic behavior. To discuss what this means for Georgia's relationship with EU institutions and the broader regional context, I'm joined by Dr. George Michelishvili, Associate Professor at European University in Tbilisi. Dr. Michelishvili, welcome to the program and thank you very much for joining.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Dr. Michelishvili, let's start with the decision itself. In your view, what prompted the Georgian Parliament to refuse participation in the Euronest session at this particular moment?
Well, it's already for several years that you think that the relations between Georgia and European Union hit the rock bottom and they cannot be spoiled any longer. But here comes another surprise. I think this decision is counterproductive, whatever are the differences and whatever is the apportionment of this fault and responsibility for these very bad relations. Dialogue is the only way out. And I think this decision is capricious on the part of the Georgian authorities, very immature, and obviously does nothing to mend the relation. I believe that the relation needs to be mended badly. Again, I believe that on certain issues, European Parliament could be less stern and more diplomatic. Yes, I would not actually apportion the totality of the blame on the Georgian authorities, Georgian government, but obviously any dialogue, any platform for dialogue should be implemented and taken advantage of.
Dr. Michelishvili, to what extent do you think the presence of MEPs at protests in Tbilisi influenced the government's perception of European engagement?
Well, there is a European engagement, but I don't think it is totally counterproductive. Yes, maybe sometimes the presence of the certain MEPs in the protests could be interpreted as siding with the other political forces. And of course, we can also question the, I would say, pro-Western credentials of these political forces these MEP are siding with. But this is also, of course, this is a matter of negotiation. I think this issue could be figured figured out and could be figured out to everyone's advantage. It requires political will and it requires the need for dialogue. Unfortunately, there is a lack thereof on the part of the Georgian authorities. Yes, again, I repeat that certain pronouncements of the European parliamentarians could be questionable. They are not that judicious, they are not that diplomatic. They obviously may be politically partial. But again, this is not the cause, this is not the reason to boycott such an important venue.
In your opinion, how is this decision likely to be received within the EU, particularly in Brussels?
Well, needless to say, it will be received badly. This will be another manifestation of the lack of the will to continue dialogue, however hard and however contentious the issues are. So I believe that no issues in the relation between Georgia and EU is irreconcilable, no difference is irreconcilable. They could be found the ground. Yes, we see the lack of a political will on both sides, but in this particular case, obviously, the ball was on the court of the Georgian leadership, and they, well, in my opinion, played this ball badly.
Dr. Michelishvili, does this move risk slowing or complicating Georgia's EU membership aspirations?
Well, the membership aspirations were distant, to begin with. Actually, the decision of the last year to stop a negotiation, to sever all, I would say, ties in terms of the process of approximation with the European Union and the ultimate membership announced 11 months ago, almost a year ago, by the Prime Minister. That was the very powerful step in terms of lack of the will to continue on this path. This path is, of course, lengthy, but that decision and the current stance of the Georgian authorities make it is more lengthy and more complicated if, this path continues at some point. I strongly believe it will continue, but it means that this prospect is as distant as ever.
So how is the Georgian public reacting to the government's latest step, especially given that polls consistently show strong support for European integration?
Exactly, and this is the pretty much the answer to the question. Even people who until recently were supporting the Georgian authorities, the Georgian leadership, the ruling party, are now questioning their credentials as the force which really genuinely wants to go to Europe. One can have some minor differences, one might have some actually kind of personal animus between certain members, but now we see the overall strategy, which is definitely not European, not pro-European.
Dr. Michelishvili, could this decision impact Georgia's standing within broader European parliamentary diplomacy frameworks beyond Euronest?
Well, Euronest is an integral part of the European Union. It is a very important platform which is held annually or once in several years. This is regular platform of dialogue. So denying this platform of dialogue means pretty much actually shows the lack of.
It looks like we have lost connection with our guest. Anyway, we are grateful to him for his insights. You are up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.